Good evening, folks. Welcome to my seventh live reading. This week, this time, I will be doing my story Fruits De Mer from the anthology Horror for Hire First Shift. This is probably one of the most bonkers things I've ever written. And it always, like, if anybody asks what are your favorite stories that you've written, this is always up there for me. Uh, yeah, I'll explain more about how it came about and all that kind of thing later. Also, get your questions in before I finish, if you have any, because I will be doing a short Q&A at the end. Okay, I'm just going to jump straight in and crack on with it. This is Fruits De Mer. Okay. The wind howled along the beach, rattling the clapboard shutters of the ancient seafood shack. Alice shivered and blew on her fingers to try and thaw them out. It had been a terrible summer thus far, and if things didn't pick up soon, she would have to shut up shop for good. The weather forecast had predicted a bright, sunny day. It just goes to show how wrong they can be. Alice had worked the seafood shack on the seafront since she left school. It was her mother's domain before hers, while her father ran the fishing boat that harvested the Fruits de Mer. She hadn't really wanted to take over the shack after her mother passed away. Instead, it was kind of thrust upon her by her grieving patriarch. That was 30 years ago, and the best years of her life had been spent scrubbing mussel shells and squirting vinegar over winkles. Her eyes stung from all the sand that had been whipped into them as she eyed the decaying pier with a look of sadness. It had once been a grand and cheerful structure that had been constructed in the twilight of Queen Victoria's reign. It was now a sad and neglected thing that looked one hefty gust of wind away from total collapse. "Morning, Alice," a less than cheerful voice called out from the t-shirt stall next door. Alice's mind had been wandering, and the sudden hijacking of her train of thought made her drop her shucking knife into the large bowl of whelks. "Oh," Alice replied with a start. "Hi, Mike. How's it going?" Mike was a large man in his 20s with a fearsome-looking beard. He shook his head as he wrung salt water out of a horrific Hawaiian shirt. "Crap, as usual." Mike was always such a cheerful soul. "I bumped into your dad down at the cafe a few minutes ago. He told me to tell you he had some special products for you, and asked me to tell you to meet him down the shed." "Okay, thanks." Alice dried the knife on her apron, then folded it and put it in her pocket. "Can you watch the store for me for a bit?" Mike grumbled, then accepted. After all, he was stuck out here in the freezing cold anyway, so why not? He was also partial to the odd cockle, so he figured that he could sneak a pot or two as payment. Down the far end of the beach, her father had a large boat shed built into the raised esplanade. It was here that he spent all of his time when not in the boat. The vaulted interior was a jumble of lobster pots, buoys, and tangled netting. One side was a large preparation area where he and whatever poor sod he had working with him at that particular moment would gut and scale the fish before packing them in ice from the industrial ice machine in the back. Once ready, he would load the fish into his van and trundle them to the local fishmongers and restaurants in town. Alice hurried along the path that wound under the pier and over towards the docks. Her father's boat sat proudly on its moorings just outside the shed. As she neared, she could hear excited voices. One was unmistakably her father's, and the other undoubtedly belonged to his latest protege, a gangly youth named Daz. "Ah, there you are, me girl," her father, Ross, boomed. "Come here, you have to try one of these." Daz was in the process of shucking the largest oyster she had ever laid her eyes upon. The shell was the size of a dinner plate, and put up a hell of a fight against Daz's knife. In all her years in the seafood trade, Alice had never seen anything remotely close to the size of that monster. With a grunt of exertion, followed by a satisfying slurp, The shell finally cleaved apart, revealing the bounty within. The flesh quivered perceptibly as it was exposed to the air. Again, Alice was struck by how abnormal the oyster was. It was about the size of her fist and almost blue in colour. Something about it looked strange and highly unappealing. Daz severed the hinge, then squirted lemon juice on the unfortunate bivalve before slurping it into his mouth. His eyes rolled in apparent ecstasy as he chewed, then swallowed the creature. Trickles of pungent liquid dribbled down his chin and dripped down the front of his overalls. Moaning in pleasure, he planted his buttocks against the bench to steady himself. Alice winced at the almost orgasmic display and looked to her father. He had just opened another and held it out for her. Here you go. Get your lips round that, he grinned. His eyes were wide and dilated. If Alice didn't know any better, she would have convinced that he'd been taking drugs. Uh, nah, you're all right, Dad. You have it, Alice blinked, brushing her mousy hair off her face. I'm not a fan of seafood, remember? This always struck people as odd that the proprietor of a seafood stall should hate seafood. But if you had spent your entire life stinking of whelks, you would probably be less than enamoured with the slimy morsels. Ross thought for a second. There was something off about his expression, a kind of distance that perturbed his daughter. Finally, he did indeed remember. Oh, I remember. But these aren't like any oysters you've ever had before, girl. These is special. His grin widened, his breath reeking of iodine. Alice glanced at Daz, who was trembling and staring into space, and nodded. I can see that. She said with revulsion, quickly changing the subject. She asked, where did you find them? There were 2 wheelbarrows full of the things sitting at the far end of the room. Daz's best mate's Uncle Art told us where to find them, just up the coast there. Ross pointed north with a shaky finger. They were just sitting there on the rocks past the crag. Spotted them when he were out with his dog, he did. Daz groaned again and started to eye Alice up and down with a wolfish expression. Alice moved away and got closer to her father. It was only now that she could see he too was trembling. I want you to take 'em and sell 'em from the stall. Knock 'em out at £1 a go. The punters will love 'em, Ross continued. She didn't have the heart to tell her father that there were no punters. None at all. Instead, she sighed and retrieved one of the barrows from the back. The craggy shellfish sat in seawater and ice, making it tricky to manoeuvre. As she wheeled her load out of the shed, her father called out to her. Daz can bring ye the other one later. Alice shuddered. The last thing she wanted to do was spend any more time alone with the leering youth. No, it's okay, Dad. They will be better in here. Kept cooler, I mean. I'll come and get them if I need them. Need them she did. An hour or so later, the sun came out from behind the colossal cloud cover, and the wind dropped to a gentle breeze. It was like there had been a horde of holidaymakers lining up on the starting blocks, ready for someone to blow the whistle. In seconds of the sun coming out, the beach was swarming with people. The first people who tried one of the mysterious oysters were so vocal about how amazing they were that she had to get poor old Mike to man the stall again while she fetched the second barrow. She mollified the cantankerous stall owner with a couple of oysters that he greedily wolfed down when she returned. The oysters had proved to be a big hit, and the cash register sung for the first time in weeks. As night crawled in off the sea, Alice had sold the majority of the harvest. She was exhausted but happy. This was all about to change. The shift from night to day heralded a similarly dramatic change on the seafront. Most of the tourist shops selling buckets, spades, and naughty postcards had shut up for the day. A few remained open to ensnare the fresh slew of drunks and teenagers that had come looking for the newly opened bars and amusement arcades. Natural light was soon replaced with a blur of flashing neon tubes and filthy multicoloured bulbs, while the gentle crashing of the waves and sprightly call of seabirds was subsumed by the thump of dance music and the clinking of glasses. Alice was in the process of putting all the unsold seafood in a barrow, ready to be dumped back into the sea for the birds and scavengers, when she spotted a familiar silhouette walking towards her. The mountainous bulk of Detective Sergeant Finch was unmistakable. "Evening, Billy," she called out cheerfully. "You're a bit late, I'm afraid. Most of the stuff has gone bad. I might have a couple of crab sticks in the fridge you can have, though." "No, you're all right, Alice. I just had a bacon sarnie in the canteen." Finch absent-mindedly brushed crumbs out of his walrus moustache. "I'm here on business, actually." "Oh, yeah? What can I do for you then, Sarge?" Alice asked in a jocularly prim voice. "Have you seen your dad?" Finch asked. "It's just I've had reports of his boats being seen up in the area around the blasted crag. He knows he's not allowed to fish up there, so it's slap on the wrist time, I'm afraid." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Alice huffed. "That stupid old goat will get himself killed one of these days. He knows it's bloody dangerous out there." Finch nodded. "Yeah, it gets worse. He was seen gathering shellfish from around the cave up there. He knows as well as I do that it's contaminated by the fungus spores in the cave." Alice's stomach dropped and her vision thinned. "Oh, hell. That's where he got his giant oysters from." "Giant oysters?" "Yeah." Alice held her hands in an approximation of the size of the creatures. Huge things. I knew there was something wrong with them. She shook her head in frustration. She knew things were desperate, but she couldn't believe that her father had been so stupid as to harvest contaminated oysters. "Bloody idiot," she spat. "He was in the boat shed last time I saw him." Finch grimaced. "Don't tell me you've been selling them to the public." "Well, yeah. I didn't know there was anything wrong with them." "Did you sell all of them?" "Nearly. There's a few left on the counter over there." Alice swallowed. This wasn't good. She could feel it in her bones. Finch slapped his forehead with his palm. "Ah, shit. It's not your fault. You weren't to know. Hopefully there will be nothing wrong with the oysters and everything will be fine." A violent retching sound from the t-shirt stall next door dashed all of DS Finch's hopes. "Oh, God." "Mike," Alice whispered. Finch looked at the stall with a pained expression. "Did he?" Alice nodded. "Bugger." Finch walked over to the door and gave it a knock. "Hey, Mike, you okay in there?" When he got no reply, he knocked again. Louder this time. "Mike, it's Billy Finch. Do you need an ambulance?" Thump. The sound of something heavy hitting the floor announced that immediate action needed to be taken. "Stand back." Finch motioned Alice aside and took a couple of steps back before launching himself at the door. The policeman's bulk nearly knocked the whole structure on its side. As the door sprung open, the corrugated tin roof rattled and a shelf load of sunglasses and keyrings clattered to the floor. "Mike?" Finch asked as he stepped inside. The interior was dark. Rows of horrifically garish beachwear lined the aisles. It was only a small structure, but Mike had somehow managed to fit a ridiculous amount of stock inside. Finch kicked a pile of cheap plastic glasses out of the way and moved towards the small bathroom at the rear of the premises. The light was on, and the lines of illumination emanated from around the frame. "Mike, you all right in there?" Finch pushed open the door and gasped. "What is it?" Alice asked from the doorway. She'd heard the noise Finch made, and her heart sunk accordingly. Stay back, Finch demanded. Whatever it was that had happened to Mike, it was clear that he was shaken. Finch grabbed his hanky from his jacket pocket and placed it over his mouth before retreating to the relatively fresh air outside. There's nothing to do, he said somberly. I'm going to have to get a hazmat team out here. What? Alice shrieked. What do you mean? He's not dead? I'm afraid so. Finch took out his phone and dialed. He walked a few paces up the beach, leaving Alice standing in bewilderment, staring at the t-shirt shack. Alice heard the strange, rhythmic clicking and faced her stall. She could hear Finch talking in the background. The music from over the way thumped and bleeped. The unnerving clacking sounds made everything fade away. She neared the stall and peered over the counter. Oh my God. The remaining oysters were glowing blue and open. Tentacle-like feelers tasted the air. Alice put her hand over her mouth to silence a scream. As one, the mollusks snapped together like a disturbing round of applause. Alice let out a small whimper of alarm. The feelers snapped in her direction, and the shells opened wider, revealing the pulsing creature within. Some of the feelers reached out for her face. Alice jumped back in alarm and instinctively removed the shucking knife from her pocket. Billy! She screamed. Finch nearly dropped his phone in the sand and turned around to see what the hell was going on. Crash! Mike clattered through the side of the shack and hurled himself on top of Alice. As they both went down, the knife entered his body just below the ribs. His body went stiff, and Finch hauled him off her. Oh my God, Alice whimpered. I've killed him. Finch shook his head bitterly. You can't have. I checked his pulse. Mike was stone dead. Alice backed away from the body and looked down at the knife sticking out of his body. There was no blood. All there was a steady trickle of seawater bubbling from the wound. Alice gagged. It smelled foul, like a combination of brackish water and rotten seaweed. But how? Your guess is as good as mine. We should get out of here and wait for the army containment boys to get here. Sirens started to become audible over the din of the clubs and amusements. Sounds like uniform are on the way. We need to get everyone away from here. What the fuck was that? Finch spun towards the stall. Alice pointed at the counter. The oysters! They've gone mad! As Finch moved forwards, Mike sprung back to his feet. Both of them gasped as Mike went through a horrific change before their eyes. His skin was blue and sallow. His veins were thick and black and spider-webbed his body, showing clearly from below his epidermis. Holy shit! Finch bellowed and snapped open his police baton. Mike's bones ground and clicked as he took shambling step after shambling step towards them. Back, Finch instructed Alice, and then levelled the baton at Mike. On the third clack, Mike's skin burst. Oysters of varying sizes forced themselves out from under his flesh. They lined his bones like farmed oysters lined ropes. Their size conformed to the size of the bone it was adhered to. His eyes sunk, and feelers like those of the ones on the stall protruded from the sockets. Mike stumbled towards DS Finch with his arms outstretched. The tiny oysters on his fingers were jagged and sharp, turning his hands into pincer-like claws. Finch swung the baton and connected with the left hand. It exploded in a shower of shell, meat, and seawater. It was gone just above the wrist. Mike kept on coming. Finch swung again. this time connecting with one of the larger oysters at the shoulder joint on the opposite arm. Again, it shattered, spraying the sand with foul goo. The arms severed and dropped to the floor, and still Mike kept coming. Alice roused herself from the shock-induced stupor and grabbed a brightly painted cricket bat from Mike's stall. Finch swung lower this time, taking out the large oyster on Mike's left kneecap. Mike finally stopped and dropped to the floor as his lower leg came away with a sickening slurp. Finch steadied himself and prepared to strike again, but was beaten to the punch, so to speak, by Alice. She brought the child-sized piece of sports equipment down on Mike's head, popping it like a gore-filled water balloon. Alice panted and looked at the mess that had once been her friend's head. "Sorry, Mike," she whispered. Alice," Finch spoke, breaking her moment of sorrow. "How many of them things did you sell?" A lot." "Well, you're going to need something bigger than a child's cricket bat." Alice looked up. Finch was pointing his baton at an approaching horde of mutant oyster men. "Fuck," Alice deadpanned. "Yep," Finch concurred. There must have been over 20 of the abominations. Leading the approach, front and centre, were Alice's father and that idiot of employee of his, Daz. God, Dad, what have you done? Alice wept. Ross, dead-eyed and shuffling, opened his mouth and unleashed a shrill cry. He tottered faster as a huge feeler burst from his mouth. Daz copied his mentor one last time, then lunged for Alice. Both Finch and Alice swung in unison, splattering the two hapless fishermen's heads. Alice wailed in anguish as she started swinging at the transformed holidaymakers that advanced on their position. Every swing connected with a splat, and more limbs and hunks of craggy shell fell to the ground. They were holding their own, but fatigue was setting in. "Get out of here," Finch bellowed between swings. "I'll hold them off." "No, I won't leave you." "It's no good," Finch said emphatically, and stepped between Alice and the horde. "Save yourself." Alice was about to argue when a familiar sound broke her attention. Finally, it dawned on her that the oyster men were merely drones, part of a diabolical hive mind. Those remaining oysters in the stall, they were the brains of the operation. Therefore, it was them that had to die. Leaving Finch to fend off the slowly advancing horde, Alice sprinted to the stall and stopped on the threshold. Tendrils whipped the air in a frenzy as they directed the horrors on the beach. She went for a shell-splattering strike, but the bat was knocked away by the flailing feelers. Her back slammed into the rear of the rickety structure, sending a shock wave reverberating through the shack. A salt shaker dropped from the serving shelf and rolled onto the counter. The oysters squealed in pain as the table salt connected with them. Though they lived in salt water conditions, the level of salinity was just too much for them to cope with. Finch stopped mid-swing as every individual oyster on the bodies of the dead opened and their feelers lashed in agony. Alice used this moment of distraction to bring the bat down again and again and again. Soon, the evil brain oysters were turned into a disgusting paste. One by one, the bodies of the infected crumbled and melted away. Soon all that was left was multiple piles of open and very dead oysters. Alice dropped to her knees next to the pile that used to be her father. The police had finally arrived, and between evacuating the oblivious public from the beach, not a single soul had witnessed what had happened. Perhaps this was for the best. No witnesses meant only a minimum of signatures required on the official secrets register. Finch winced as he imagined what the papers would have made of all of this. The big man tried to comfort Alice, but it was no use. Over the following months, he tried to keep an eye on her, but it was all to no avail. In the end, she deteriorated into a catatonic state and lived out the rest of her life in a mental hospital. Some people just weren't equipped to cope with such mind-shattering events. As for D.S. Finch, he continued to do his job and take every bizarre day in Bethel's Cove as it came. There was one thing for sure, though. That was the last time he was going to touch oysters. The end. Thank you. Yeah, that was Fruits De Mer. And I'm particularly proud of that one for a simple reason. Before I say anything, get your get your questions down on the thingamabobs, and I'll answer them when I've finished rambling. Yeah, it was how it came about. I like to give myself stupid challenges. For instance, this one. I bet I could make a horror story about oysters. I like turning something completely innocuous into something murderous. It's what I like about writing. I mean, it's the kind of horror I like as well, Something that in everybody's home might suddenly turn against you, and suddenly. Anyway, that story is from Horror for Hire First Shift. The details on how to get a copy is below the video, or should be below the video. It's getbook.at, horror for hire, all one word, and then the number 1. Now, this was the second one I submitted to what became a 2-book series. The first one that I submitted ended up in the second volume, Horror for Hire Second Shift. If you want to get hold of that, it's getbook.at, horror for hire 2. The story in that, God in the Machine, it's a sort of cosmic horror in an office, and it's actually a pseudo sequel to the first story that I ever had published, which has recently finally come out in this, which is Gruesome Games, which is a very sexy looking book. I mean, look, black paper, white writing. As a goth, I appreciate that. But anyway, I'd already done. I knew when I saw the submission call about work and things like that. I knew I wanted to do something in an office with what I did for the next stop. That's called The God in the Machine. I knew what I wanted to do from that, but I also had in my head, what is quintessentially British? And I live in Hove, and I can see the beach from here, like on the balcony. I can see the sea from, and my overwhelming childhood memories of seaside holidays with my family was the rickety winkle stall, and it was always run by these little old ladies with the scoops and the squirt of the vinegar. And I thought, well, there's going to be a lot of people doing offices. I've already done office, so let's do a completely different take on it. And I'm really glad I did, because I had so much fun writing that one. I had real fun reading it out. Okay, so yeah, I'll just have a look now. I'll check the comments. Evening, Chris. The description of eating the oyster is almost grosser than the polluted shellfish itself. I know, I thought that. I wanted to get that sort of, what was a good, that sort of, yeah, that sort of David Lynch kind of, David Cronenberg, David Lynch kind of unease with something every day, but taken into a sort of almost psychosexual kind of way. Yeah. What's topical? Apparently something's topical. Yeah, props, David. Oh yes. Yeah, the use of props is really bringing us into old radio theatre territory. I love radio theatre. I'm a huge Doctor Who nerd, and I actually think that the best Doctor Who since Sylvester McCoy, since the proper Doctor Who finished, is the Big Finish audios, the audio dramas. They're so good. Also, I know that there's a lot of fans of Lovecraft that tune into this kind of thing. Check out HP Lovecraft Historical Society's Dark Adventure Radio Theatre. Their audio dramatizations of a bunch of Lovecraft stories are absolutely superb. I would recommend them to anybody. I like to bang them on in the bath, stick on the Haunter for the Dark, lie in bath. Brilliant. The oysters have gone mad. There's a line I didn't expect to hear today. Yeah, I did warn everybody it was a bit bonkers. Yeah, I live for lines like that. I mean, I really do. If I could get lines like that in everything I wrote, I'd die a happy man. I really would. Yep. I think I just lost my appetite. David Green, not hungry now. It's a bit late for eating, you UK people, It's not my fault. Evil brain oysters. Tops, the oysters have gone mad. Thank you, Raven. I thought, That's two of us. Applauds. Yeah, well done. Kudos on the props as always. Was that a lettuce leaf? What, this? No, it's a tentacle monster. It's got eyes and everything. Look. He's called Zugi, and he flashes. This is yeah, I posted up a cryptic post earlier on my author page that I know a few of you saw. So basically my cryptic post was Blue Peter has a lot to answer for. That's this. It's two scallop shelf soap dishes attached together with electrical tape and an elastic band sellotaped on the top. So yeah, Blue Peter has a lot to answer for. I should get a badge for that, I think I deserve a Blue Peter badge. No problem, Mike. Glad you enjoyed. Question: how sexy is too sexy? Oh dear. Not when to sound like Right Said Fred. Too sexy, it hurts. You're thinking it in your head as well. Yeah. Thanks, David. I'm going to have Right Said Fred's I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt stuck in my head all night now. Question from Raven: what body horror gets to you? Obviously, you're good at writing things that are gross and terrible, but what makes my skin crawl? Honestly, not that much. I've a very strong stomach with things. I mean, as a child, I spent a lot of time in hospital. I had quite a lot of serious operations as a kid, and I had eye surgery and one of my ankles had to, and I had a lot of like seriously invasive surgeries when I was a kid. Uh, so I got an incredibly high threshold of pain, and then later in life, I smashed my knee up and had to have reconstruction surgery, falling off a motorbike, idiot. Uh, and then obviously I developed transverse myelitis, which is like a shadow the size of a cashew nut between my second and first cervical vertebrae. So, and that gives you a whole new outlook on pain and suffering. Let me tell you. But what makes me, I tell you what does, the one thing that does freak me out, and you could probably guess by the state of them, dentists. Oh. There's something about somebody sticking a drill in your face. Yeah, nothing else, not much else. It's like films. I other people get grossed out by them. I'll just sit there, but quite often I'm taking notes. I'm a bit of a fan of low budget special effects, especially. I mean, I started when I was growing up. It was the height of the video nasty phase, And I mean, like the Evil Dead was banned over here for a long time, and you had like Driller Killer and all these other tremendously trashy films. So yeah, freaks me out. Yeah, I mean, more psychological things freak me out than actual body horror. stuff like that. Apart from Dennis, you know. Okay. Chris asks if you were to rewrite in a post COVID-19 world, would you have killed off more people, off more of the people flooding the beaches? Oh, I get it now. I get it now. Yeah, yeah. Like Brighton, mate. Seriously. Last couple of days, Brighton, and then just down, like not far away, Bournemouth. It's been absolute madness. And the pandemic's still on. But I guess the thing is, I always have this problem when I see the pictures. It can't be much fun. I mean, I'm not a big fan of people. I mean, crowds. I'm not a big fan of crowds anyway. If I went to the bit, I couldn't. That's my idea of hell, to be absolutely honest. But yeah, yeah, I probably would. I'm feeling 20 wasn't enough. I was certainly struggling to sympathise with their plight after some of the images of Bournemouth this week. Yeah, I get you that one, Chris. Only Fools and Horses, quintessentially British. Indeed. I mean, I was raised on British sitcoms, carry-on films, and I always have an element of that in my stories. I mean, I love that British absurdity. Like Monty Python did it brilliantly. The Carry On team did it brilliantly. Sitcoms like One Foot in the Grave is brilliant for the absurd in the everyday. It's great for it. It's just a you know. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of modern comedy. I find it a bit too obvious. I mean, just saying like you know, bum or something isn't as fun as saying, "Oh, that's a lovely bun you've got in your hand." I prefer innuendo, you know. I mean, I just always will, but I always have an element of that in. Um, for instance, character the one of the lead characters in this one, D.S. Finch. Some people may have already recognised from the other story I did from Emerald Bay Books, which was from the Unleashed anthology, which was How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? He has a cameo in that. He's a character that recurs in quite a few of my stories. I mean, most of my stories are set in this little microcosm of Cornwall, Bettles Cove, High Bend, Hollow Hills. It's my milieu. There's Joel Hunt called it the Mendees mythos. I like that. But anyway, and he's one of he's one of the main recurring characters in the whole lot. He crops up in quite a few. He's in the novella that I've got coming out with Black Hair, Miracle Growth. And this is what I'm getting to is about how I like to put that British absurdity into horror. Is Miracle Growth was my idea of what would Day of the Triffids have been like if it was written by Lovecraft and then turned into a screenplay by Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright. So I was kind of thinking Hot Fuzz. So and that's what I mean. I mean, I love that his works. It is very Python-esque. It is also very Carry On. It's got that quintessentially British absurdity, you know, and I love that. Yeah. Right, said Tim. Yeah, that's badge worthy. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, cheers, man. I thought you'd like it. It's not quite Tracy Island or a bog roll Dalek, but it works. Oh yeah, Carry On Up the Khyber. Yeah, that's your favourite, is it, David? Yeah, it's one of mine. It's definitely up there. Me and a friend of mine, Steve-O, we meet up every now and then. Round here, he comes round, visit every now and then. And we get the bottle of gin out, and we'll sit and watch Carry On Up the Khyber and a couple of other Carry On movies. So, yeah, I mean Monty Python. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so thanks for everybody for tuning in. I hope my nose didn't twitch quite too much. I'm really suffering with the pollen at the minute. Uh, like I say, Horror for Hire First Shift and Horror for Hire Second Shift, which I'm also in, are both out now on Amazon from Emerald Bay Books. Yep, it's getbook.at. Horror for Hire, all one word, and then a number 1 for the one with Fruits De Mer in it, this story. And then for the other one with God in the Machine in it is Horror for Hire, all one word, 2. Yeah, before I go, I'd just like to, like I say, thank everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Kyle Harrison for, first of all, accepting this ridiculous story, and also for letting me do it live. I had a great time, great fun. I'll probably be doing another one. No idea which one yet, but I'm sure I'll figure something out. Thank you, and I will see you next time.